If he wasn't in so much pain, Alex would have enjoyed riding on the back of a bear. But every jostle and jolt from each heavy footfall tugged and tore at the gashes across his chest. He hissed and winced, fingers buried deep in fur, holding on as hard as their weakened grip would allow. The bear lifted its head and denied towards him, grunting. Alex blinked. The grunt was a word. Soon. His head swam in confusion. He didn't remember bears being able to talk. He certainly didn't remember being able to understand them. The world spun around in his eyes, and he could no longer recognize it. He thought he was in the woods at home, enjoying a walk at night among the tall oaks and pines, but these trees were bent and twisted, with violet canopies and velvet vines hanging low like willow branches. There was no moon in the sky, and even with a bleary gaze from the tears he knew he had no North Star above to guide him. And this bear he rode on was not quite a bear. His ears were short, hairless flaps of skin, looking almost vestigial. The nose was larger and somehow even shorter, like someone had crossed a pug with a grizzly. And, most obviously unlike any other bear he'd seen, this bear could talk and wear clothes, if the snowshoe claws beaten out of scrap metal in his 2 front feet counted as clothes. But despite these bewildering appearances, he knew this bear. He had recognized the greying hairs, the almost haunted look in the eyes. This was the bear which had fed him well back in those clean white corridors, which had given him clothes and even tried to communicate with him, with signs. All things the bugs who abducted him had never attempted. And this bear was a reminder that it was not all a dream, that he was here on a planet countless miles from Earth, abducted, tried, sentenced by a little grey man to be here, in an alien woods, riding the back of a bear. Not any bear, he reminded himself, but a friend. Firelight filled his eyes. The smell of roasting meat wafted into his nostrils. Pain kept him white-knuckled, clutching the fur with all his strength. He was in no state but to lie and listen to a language he now seemed to recall like an ancient memory. What's all this? Fresh meat, camping in the hills, reported the bear Alex rode in on. This thing and 2 bugs, probably from the same queen you captured. They made a few clever traps, took down 3 raiders trying to take them. We took care of 4 more. I've never seen a creature like that. The other bear stepped forward to appraise him. Into Alex's vision poked a white-furred snout, which sniffed his quivering wounds and gave a sobering prognosis. Too bad it won't survive the night. Put it over the fire with the rest, Bagrim. My spear, Alex thought with sudden lucidity. If only I had my spear. The world stopped spinning as adrenaline gave him one last desperate rush. Timber, interrupted Bagrim. This thing's clever. Those bugs didn't come up with the traps we found. Look at this weapon. Do you think a bug made that? It's a piece of rock lashed to a stick. What, am I supposed to be impressed? Alex heard his blade cut flesh and felt Bagrim's leg quiver. You were saying? The bear grunted through the pain. If you want to challenge my rule, do it with your claws or not at all, Timber growled. Put that thing on the fire and clean yourself up. Take the bugs to their queen, too. I'll take care of it, Bagrim offered. I'll feed it from my own cut of the meat. Not a chance. Meat is for warriors, not invalids. It killed 3 Raffi with this stick and some traps. If you let it rest and heal, you'll have another warrior. Such a puny thing like that? Timber mused. Must have a mind like an Oldran to be that clever. The leader paced around in thought, claws scraping the dirt. At last he drew up beside Bagrim, 2 black voiceful eyes staring deep into Alex's own. Fine. You have 3 days. After that it has to earn his keep. Bagrim bowed. Thank you, chieftain. Bagrim set Alex down in a den of leaves, on the far side of the camp. Taking off the metal claws he wore on his front feet, he sat beside Alex, checking the wounds under the brown-stained bandages. Then, out from between his teeth, his tongue pulled a little silvery tube which he placed between them. I hope you can understand this, Bagrim said in his own Urashi tongue, perfectly clear to Alex. The little device repeated the same words, synthesized into the Koan Raffi tongue. How Alex knew the names of these languages he couldn't explain. Alex nodded. Bagrim paused. Is that a yes? Yes, Alex croaked in his best imitation of Urashi. The quarter-ton beast jumped at the sound. How long have you known Urashi? Years and days, Alex said. Both felt true. Bagrim picked up the translator, switched it off, and placed it back between his teeth. How did you learn it? Water, Alex requested. Water first. Bagrim tried his best nod and trundled off. He returned to find Alex pulling off his bandage, watching a fresh red river of blood run down his stomach. What are you doing? The Raff yelped, scrambling to replace the makeshift bandage. Alex's pale hand prevented him. It was no longer shaking. The cloud that had fogged in his eyes had suddenly lifted, revealing a stark, decisive glare. The glare of a person who had just hours to live if they didn't act fast. Needle, thread, tweezers, boiling water, Alex ordered. Bagrim nodded and disappeared while Alex sipped what water he could without moving his wounded chest too much. His furry companion came charging back with all the requisite materials hanging from its mouth, including a bucket of steaming water by the handle. I need to suture the wound, Alex said. He sanitized the needle, thread and tweezers as best he could in the boiling water, and stilled his stomach, jaw and mind for the pain to come. He let out a little gasp when the needle poked through his skin, then grit his teeth, as he pulled the thread through while pinching the wound tight. The first stitch left him panting. Water, he added, and Bagrim poured it as gently as he could into Alex's open mouth before Alex shook his head and continued. Another stitch, and then another, but each was taking longer than the first. His fingers, soaked with his own blood, were starting to tremble. He blinked and blinked harder still, wiping the sweat from his brow. At last, on the fifth stitch, still barely finished with just one scratching free, he set down the needle and tweezers and sighed. My hands are shaking too much. Can you do it? It's too delicate for me, Bagrim said regretfully. Not with these paws. Then get the bugs, the ones which were with me. They can do it. Bagrim galloped across camp as fast as he could, finding the pen where Ship Queen Hokaki was kept with what remained of her brood. Already 2 or 3 had been culled for Temba's dinner. The rest huddled up close to their queen, terrified and unwilling to be taken, but just as fretful to fight back. Meanwhile, 2 other bugs, a worker and a soldier, though they all looked the same to him, sat apart against the rock cliff that enclosed them on one side. The soldier's antenna was busted, and the worker was seeing to it. Glancing back, Bagrim realized that the other bugs were willing to fight, but only against their traitors. He didn't bother with the translator. He picked the 2 outcasts and threw them on his back, then lumbered out of the pen. The guard stopped him. Where are you going with these ones? Temba's orders. They go to the fire. The guard gave a lick to one of the soldier's legs. I can't wait to taste bug, he salivated. Bagrim shoved him away. Save it for later. He carried the 2 past the roasting fire and all the way to his den, keeping as low a profile as he could while others chatted close to the spits and fire pits. Then he donned them beside Alex, with the worker immediately taking to his side and trying to bandage his wounds. He waved it off. Then, in their own silent way, he showed it how to suture his wound. First he demonstrated the task himself with a quivering hand, then he held up the needle and thread for the worker's foreclaws to grasp. Reluctantly it took them, and recoiled when he winced as it poked the needle through. But with a consoling smile from Alex, it returned to his side and finished 1 stitch, then another and another. Soon all the wounds were closed tight, and Bagrim offered it a wet rag to wipe the fresh stitches clean. Seeing the job was done, Alex finally fell asleep, his face shrouded in serenity. He still woke up the next morning, in pain, yes, but still alive, unlike Temba's predictions. Only time would tell him if the wounds were infected, but as he correctly assumed, his little insect friend was a born sorcerer. The claw marks were sewn tight, and hopefully would leave nothing more than a few handsome scars. He thought he'd disturb Bagrim when the furry bulk stirred, but the eyes that turned back toward him were wide awake, on guard all night. Thank the gods you survived. I thought we lost you, Bagrim rumbled. I thought so too, Alex admitted. You never answered my question. How did you learn Arashi? It took a long time for Alex to form the words, to come up with anything resembling a coherent description of what he saw. I saw myself speaking it, but it wasn't me. It was a memory in my mind, but it wasn't my own. How can you have a memory that isn't your own? I don't know. There was a little grey man in that courtroom. I know his name is Malice. One moment I was me, and the next I was him, and the next I was me again. Then I saw an even smaller grey, a child. Then I saw the child through another's eyes, and he was old and shriveled. Then I saw thousands, millions, so many lights and lives like that one. There was space, then there was electricity, steel, and then fire. Fire and then a dark cave. It's how the Alderaans speak, Bagrim concluded, tapping his own skull. They say they speak to each other in memories, just using their minds. I guess we never knew how literal they meant it. But they weren't just Malice's memories. They were memories of countless Alderaans. I'm not even sure they're all still alive. Bagram scratched his chin and nodded grimly. Most of them are probably dead. Why? The Alderaans are refugees. They flee the unknown, which nearly wiped them out not long ago. They gave us and the Klakan spacefaring technology, invented the Universal Translator, bound us all together by the Concord to resist the Unknown's approach. We fought the Unknown to a stalemate ever since. Who are the Unknown? Don't you know anything about who you're fighting? 6 legs, 2 brains, like the Alderaans, but the upper brain is too small, practically vestigial. Their ships are faster, so we have to be clever to catch even one. Their crews are fanatics who will fight to the death rather than surrender, so we've never captured one alive. All we have are autopsies and no clear reason why they want us all dead. But that's where you come in. Me? You're here because you saw something Malice didn't want you to see. Something the Alderaans might be keeping from the rest of us about the unknown. What was it? Alex tried long and hard to recollect anything that scandalous. I don't know. It all blew past me like a hurricane. I couldn't give you any details. Isn't there something? But Alex could only shake his head. No, I'm sorry. Maybe in time I could process it, but my head's already throbbing just trying to remember any of it. Bagram's shoulders slumped. It's all right, he said. Rest up. You'll need your strength. Alex laid back down in the den of leaves with a hiss and a sigh. The sleepy bugs curled themselves under his arm. I need at least a week before these wounds heal. Bagram's eyes peered over the camp to their white-haired chieftain. We don't have a week, he said.